So welcome everyone to the 7th annual Career Wave at Tulane University. I love this event and I congratulate you all for taking part in it. We're here in Uptown, or I'm here in Uptown. The weather is absolutely spectacular. And as I was walking across campus today, sure enough, there was a socially distant brass band second line coming out, only in New Orleans, only at Tulane. So I wish we could have this event as we've had in the past on campus and bring everyone together. But obviously this year it's virtual. And we're not crossing into different cities in the United States. We're bringing people in from cities across the United States. So virtual is in some sense a metaphor for what you need to learn, I think, from this event, which is change. Everything's changing. The world is changing, and that you need to keep that in mind when you're trying to map out your career. And let me say at the beginning, do as I say, not as I do. Because I think about my own career when I was, in a sense, starting out. I literally took a job with an organization, and I've literally stayed at one or two organizations my whole life. Your career, you're going to be moving from job to job. Harvard Business Review just had an article, 21% of millennials changed job in the last year. In your generation, Generation Z, will be moving even more than that. So you really need to be thinking not about a particular job, but a series of jobs and how to put together your career life. You also need to be thinking about fields. When I went out, I had no conception of how many different fields would exist, areas of study. Today, you know, renewable energy, climate change, income, racial inequality, these are all issues defining lives and careers at this point. I don't know what will exist in the future, but you need to be thinking about that. The one other thing you need to be thinking about is something that I didn't fully appreciate, is the idea of networks. That is literally get to know your classmates, your friends, alumni, parents. It's that which is so important to not only joy in life, but success in life. It's the Tulane relational culture. And I'll tell you a sad story about me. When I was in college, there was a poker game that they play down the hall from me every week, and I never ever joined it. But in retrospect, I should have, because it turned out years later, I saw on the front of Time magazine a picture of the fellow who ran that poker game about his company, his little company called Microsoft. Obviously, it was Bill Gates, and I never, in a sense, got to know him as part of that activity. You need to get to know all of your classmates across Tulane University, because they're going to be part of your family, part of your network for the rest of your life. And that's what this event is about, getting to know the speakers, getting to know all of these people. It's part of, in a sense, your career and mapping your career. We have an incredible lineup of people. Obviously, they're being virtual. We can bring people in from across the United States. But I do want to sort of shout out to obviously some stars of this. Wade Davis is simply an incredible individual. He has literally shifted the narrative on issues of gender, race, orientation, equality in the media. He's defined this area. He's a thought leader in so many different issues of inclusivity. He's vice president of inclusion strategy for product and Netflix, and a consultant to a wide range of organizations: Google, MTV, 20th Century Fox, and NFL. I must confess, I also know him as a phenomenal football player in prior life. He's clearly extraordinarily fast, both on the field and in his career. And I'm delighted that we could have him to speak to us today. He is going to be interviewed by Trejon. Shelton really represents the best of Tulane. He's a senior in international relations, as well as a minors in Chinese management, and spent the fall of 2019 in Shanghai. Clearly an incredible figure. an individual that represents Tulane so well. There will be a Q&A afterward, which will be led by Paula Booke, who is director for Tulane Center for Academic Equity, as well as Eddy Cruz, who's assistant dean for career services. But before we turn the stage over all those individuals, I'd like to introduce Anneliese Singh, who is the literally Chief Diversity Officer at Tulane University, Associate Provost for Diversity and Faculty Development, and is really at the center of so many initiatives at Tulane, not only what we're doing now, but what we need to do in the future, which is absolutely essential to the, in a sense, the inclusiveness and the excellence of this university. She is herself a graduate of Tulane University, as well as has a PhD in counseling from Georgia State, is a member of the faculties both of psychology and social work at Tulane, and is the co-chair of the President's Commission on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, which is helping to lead these efforts to change not only the substance, but the culture of Tulane, so that we really are a model in all of these areas. So with that, I want to turn the virtual mic over to Anneliese Singh. Anneliese.
Thank you. Thank you, President Fitz. We greatly appreciate your words of welcome and encouragement about our careers and our networks. I have to say your life's commitment to diversity, inclusion, and justice just shows in your own career and how you lead our university. And I'm so grateful for your clarity as we move in the direction of anti-racism, justice, and belonging. So I just want to thank you from all of the people that you inspire every day. And I just want to tell our community, hello, good day to everyone. I want to congratulate the folks who have organized this year's Tulane Takeover. And I know you've had so much awesome learning so far that's been generated despite, and maybe because, as President Fitz was saying, of this virtual networking event. My name's Anneliese Singh. I use she and they pronouns, and I do serve as Tulane's inaugural Chief Diversity Officer. I lead the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and I am a proud Tulane alum, Newcomb class of '91. But I want to reintroduce myself to you. I identify as South Asian, as mixed race, as white adjacent, as a genderqueer femme, and as someone with lots of class and educational privilege. I'm currently not living with any known disabilities. I'm the daughter of both an Indian Sikh immigrant father who experienced British colonization and the great trauma of the partition of India and Pakistan, and of a white mother from Monroe in Louisiana, in the land that we now call the United States, whose family was adjacent to white enslaver behaviors. Why do I share all these identities when I have the great honor of introducing Wade Davis? I actually feel that I must, as I've followed the work that Wade has been pouring into the world when it comes to equity and justice. Through his words, his actions, his inspirations, he's helped us, he's nudged us. In so many ways, he's demanded from us that we do better as humans, that we lean into the curiosity of who we actually are in terms of our intersecting identities and the related interlocking privileges and disadvantages. And then he really pushes us to use that knowledge to make social change everywhere we can. Wade is going to share his story of social change with us based on all of those lived identities he carries. And of course, Wade and all of us gathered here today at Tulane are more than these intersections, but still these intersections matter and can help us consider how we can all use our lives more fully to confront systems of racism, sexism, heterosexism, and more right where we study, work, learn, and grow at Tulane. We've seen from afar how Wade has used his life, how he's spoken truth to power in the NFL, uplifting voices of queer and trans communities as a Black gay man, and now as VP of Inclusion Strategy for Product at Netflix. He is literally changing what we see in terms of equity, diversity, inclusion. But we've also seen from afar how Wade has been bold and audacious. We like to use those words at Tulane. He's been a co-conspirator and an accomplice for women's rights. He's done incredible work in solidarity with the hashtag #MeToo movement, the Time's Up Now, and Black men and feminism liberation movements. And he's worked as a global champion for innovation for UN Women. If history is being written about equity and justice all of the time, and it certainly is, Wade is showing us how we can shape and mold history making. So as Dr. King would say, it bends towards justice. A couple of other things as Tulane, we're thinking deeply about how we dig into our past and understand who we are, how we challenge one another with love and compassion and build a beloved community where we center the margins and learn how to have brave and crucial conversations to actions about EDI, anti-racism, and how we live these cherished values. So I know we're going to be excited for all the learning we received from Wade today, as he is one of the most authentic voices of change we can hear from at this moment. On his Twitter feed, he's got an image of James Baldwin. So Wade, I got to share some, I call him Uncle Jimmy. He's our family, right? Some Baldwin quotes as I introduce you. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. And you've taught us so much about unmasking, Wade. Baldwin says, love takes off masks that we fear we cannot live without, and we know we can't live within. Thank you for living your most authentic self and for being so apologetic. Welcome to Tulane community, and we can't wait to learn from you today.
Wow, that was maybe the best introduction I've ever had. And honestly, I'm somewhat speechless, but I'm grateful to be in community, in family with so many of you all. I was telling some of the folks backstage that I'm a Southerner, that I was raised in Shreveport. I was born in Little Rock, but then at around the age of 2, my mother and we moved back to Shreveport, where my mother's from. And I have not had a chance to go back to Shreveport, I want to say in probably 10 years, but it still feels like home. Like I name myself as a Southerner, even though I haven't lived in the South since I was, I want to say 12. My roots are Southern and I carry them everywhere I go. So thank you for that. I'm just awestruck by your brilliance, by your genius, by your authenticity as well. So thank you. I wanted to start my remarks with a poem, and this poem is probably my favorite, and it's by the famed scholar, poet, just brilliant person, Lucille Clifton. And as I think about like what can we learn from our past to take going forward, as we're all trying to figure out how do we thrive, how do we survive, how do we care for ourselves and then care for each other. I thought that this poem by Lucille Clifton was a great opportunity to really ground us in this conversation. And this poem is called "Won't You Celebrate With Me?" And it goes, "Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model, born in Babylon, both non-white and woman. What did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay. My one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed." Now you all might be asking, why start with a poem of celebration? And I think about it that because of this year, last year, and many years before, many of us have struggled. But as Baldwin might say, because you're here, you've learned something. You've learned something about yourself, and you've definitely learned something about the world. So as you all are thinking about, how to take your talented selves out into the world, there's a couple questions that I want to start by asking. And the first question is, who are you? Now, that's different from the question of what are you? And the world will tell you what you are with blinding clarity. The world told me that I was Black, that I was queer, that I grew up poor, that I was undereducated, that I was a son, right? Like all of these labels are what the world tells you what you are. But the who is what you become because of those labels. And it's your job to really interrogate, who am I? Because if you can understand who you are, that is something that the world cannot take from you, right? And it took me a long time to move away from what, which is an external label, to the who, which is something that I get to define and that I am at my core. And I had a coach tell me once, that what you do when no one's watching is actually who you are. And I thought about like, how has that shaped my life? I went to college in Utah, a small school called Weber State in Ogden. And I remember in the summer times, I would stay in Utah. Now, if anybody has been to Utah, there's not much to do there any time of the year, but there's definitely not much to do when school is out. But instead of going back to Colorado, where I went to high school and where my parents were, I would stay in Utah. And I would train 3 times a day. No one was there except me. In the morning, I would write out what my workout was, and I would have a measure to actually say, like, can I achieve what I've written out for myself to do? And then I'd go back home, maybe I'd eat, maybe I'd sleep, and then in the middle of the day, I'd go work out again. And then again, like my goal was to reach this bar that I had set for myself. And then I'd go back home, maybe I'd read, maybe I'd nap. More than likely, I was playing video games. And then I'd go back out, at around 5, 6, or 7, and then I'd run again. And all of my friends thought that it was wild that I did not go home, that I didn't want to get out of this small city, to get out of this state. But I needed to see, like, what could I become? Like, who was I? And who was I was someone who valued hard work. What I also learned about who I was, and this is a really important distinction, that I was someone who was more focused on excellence than success. Now, a lot of us are told that we should grow up and become successful. But what does that actually mean? Who gets to determine what is successful? Is successful being a VP? Is successful making $100,000 a year? Is successful being able to take care of your family? All of these typical measures of success are, again, external measures. But excellence is a measure that I got to control. So when I was in Utah and I was working out those 3 times per day, I was chasing excellence, not success. As long as you're chasing success, you're chasing someone else's definition of who you are and who you can become. But imagine how it feels to be able to define, as Audre Lorde says, to define myself for myself so I don't be crushed in the imaginations of others and eaten alive. The only way that you can find out who you are is to do it alone. The only way that you can find out who you are is to be still, is to be silent. Over the last couple of weeks, my partner and I, we did a fast. And I hadn't fasted in many years. And the thing about fasting is that it allowed me to be quiet in a way that is almost undescribable. Your body's really quiet because your body goes into this self-preservation mode, and it's got to quiet itself. So I have to also quiet myself with it. And you get to really, really feel. I'm also someone who meditates. Now, my partner, he loves his sleep. So I wake up in the morning 2 hours before him so I can have some time to myself, to be still, to be quiet, and to meditate. And in those moments of meditation, I get to figure out, like, to reinvest, in the idea of who I am, not what I am. I get to reinvest in what are my definitions of excellence. But the only way that I could ever get there is through silence, is through stillness, is through some type of system, whether it's fasting or meditation, or whether it is just sitting all alone on a hike, where I can figure out, like, who I am and what am I chasing and why am I chasing these things? And do I get to determine those things? So I ask you all, as you're thinking about what am I going to do next? Think about first, who am I? And what is my measure for excellence? Because as long as you allow somebody else to define for you what you are, who you are, what success is, you're always chasing something that is not native and germane to who you are. I'll tell you one last story. I was applying for this job where I was recruited in for this job opportunity. And one of the senior leaders at this organization, she brought me into her office and she was telling me about the man who I was about to meet, who was the power broker, who was going to be able to say whether or not I was going to get this job. And again, they recruited me. And she ran down his resume. I mean, told me all of the amazing things that he had done. You know, this person was an astrophysicist. This person had everything that I thought that one needed to be powerful, right? And what power really means is the ability to control the destiny of others. And in that moment, that person in my mind had the ability to control my destiny. So after she ran down this individual's resume and she walked out of the room, I got deeply insecure. I started to wrestle with these ideas of imposter syndrome. But thankfully, I had an opportunity to be still, to be quiet, and to think, well, wait a minute. They came for me. They came for me. And what he knows is not what I'm being hired for. I'm being hired for what I know. So instead of me trying to perform a certain level of success or a certain idea of who I believe that they needed to be, when I really rested in who I was, I remembered that I am enough. I have always been enough. But if I'm always worried about how someone else views me, I can never be enough. So this individual walks in the room and he says, Wade, it's so great to meet you. And he asked me one question and I answered it. And then he wanted to learn more about me in that moment. And I paused and I said, why don't we get to me a little later? But I would love to ask you a couple questions because I remembered my own power. I remembered my own agency and I remembered my own excellence because they wanted me. I didn't want them. I didn't need them. So I didn't need to give up my power. I had to remember that I have power too. And the only way that I remain powerless is by giving up something that I have created inside of myself. So I ended up asking this individual 5 or 6 questions. And that person kept saying, wow, it's a great question. I never thought about that. Oh, yeah, I never thought about that either. So after I asked this individual about 5 or 6 questions, I never went back and told this person what I was or who I was because they already knew. I wouldn't have been in the room if I wasn't competent and capable and excellent at what I did. And after I asked this individual a couple questions, the next thing that they said was, when do we get started? I tell you all that story with intention to remind yourself to not give up your power. And before I pass it back over to Trejon, I want to leave you all with a quote. And the quote is, I stand before my highest mountain and before my longest journey. Therefore, I must descend deeper than I have ever before descended. What this quote is about is going inside of yourself, finding out again who you are. Your longest and hardest journey is never going to be external. It is always, always going to be internal. And if I can promise you, if you can learn who you are and never worry about what you are, if you can center excellence and not success, if you can understand that the journey is internal and never external, you won't worry about what you're going to face because you have faced the hardest thing in the world, which is to become yourself. So thank you all, and I look forward to the next part of this conversation.
Wow. Wade, you're amazing, man. I'm truly at a loss for words. And thank you for such empowering and inspiring remarks. Hello to the community. Hello, Wade. As President Fitz and Anneliese stated, my name is Trejon Shelton, and I'm a senior from the Los Angeles area who studies at Tulane University, and I study international relations with a minor in Chinese and management. And let me just say, it is truly an honor to be able to be a part of this event and to interview you, Wade. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and speak with the Tulane community. And, I wish we had the opportunity to meet in person, but I think it's still so great that we have the technology to be able to do this event. And as President Fitz said, to bring people together from all over the country, to join in on this. So
thank you, brother. I'm honored to stand in community with you as well. So I'm planning on learning as much from you as you think that you're going to learn from me. So I believe that education is cyclical, right? That when you're a teacher, you're also a learner, and when you're a learner, you're also a teacher. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'm excited, yeah, man. So I got a couple questions for you. I took some time to do some research on you, and let me just say, man, like, you truly are a Renaissance man. You have done it all. You have accomplished so much, and you've been such an inspiration to so many people. So when I was reading up on you, I was just like, this is the guy right here. He's doing it all. So like I said, it is truly an honor to be able to ask you a couple questions. So to kick it off, the first question I have for you is, connecting the thread from your first job to your current role, has there been a unifying approach to how you've chosen which companies to work with?
No, if I'm just going to be flat out honest, no, there is no thread. So I won't consider the NFL my first job, right? Just because, like, when you make it into professional sports, it is somewhat different. But I will tell you, the very first job that I had post NFL, I got fired from. Not just honest, right? And it was because, right, it was not something I wanted to do. So when you retire from the NFL, people, like, everybody's telling you like what career path that you should take, right? And I had no clue. You know what I mean? Like, I had a business degree in marketing. I thought I was relatively smart, but I didn't really know like what motivated me, right? Like, what are the things that got me out of bed, right? Like, I love sports. I love reading. Not that I didn't like writing, I didn't know the things that I should be writing about. So I didn't love any of that. So a buddy of mine was like, hey, like, why don't you go work in sales? Like, all the NFL players, they're hungry, they're aggressive, you're A-type, right? So all of the stereotypical ideas of what it means to be a salesperson. So I took this job, and I am not overstating this. This is not hyperbole. I worked at this job for like a year and a half, and I literally did nothing. Every day I would go into that job, and I had a buddy, some people who I worked with that I would make laugh. I would do, my fantasy football. I would do the March Madness stuff. I mean, I did everything except my job. And in meetings, I would just make up clients. I was a true BS artist. And one day, my boss called me into his office, and I had been called into his office so many times. I was always waiting for the day that I would get fired. But months, years went past, so I didn't. So finally, he called me to his office, and he said, "Wade, what do you do here?" Right? And I just started laughing. It was nothing to do but laugh. And he started laughing too. And he said, "Hey, we're gonna let you go." And I was like, I couldn't complain. I couldn't push back because I literally did nothing. And the strangest thing happened, and this will tell you how much of a novice I was to understand the corporate world. When he told me they were going to give me severance, I was like, wow, you're going to pay me to leave? Yeah. And then I got unemployment. So I had a nice severance check. I had unemployment. I was like, I'm good. Plus, I still had a little bit of NFL money left. But the next job that I had is the through line. So past that job, another friend of mine said, hey, like, you really don't know what you want to do. Why don't you go volunteer, right? So I was very nascent in my understanding of what it meant to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, all of these identities. And he was like, why don't you go work with LGBTQ youth? And I was like, oh, that's a good idea, right? So I walked into this organization looking to volunteer. and I walked out with a job. And now I would come to understand later why I would get hired at a nonprofit, and because what nonprofits need is they need to fundraise. And to be able to say that we have a former NFL player who is also queer working for our organization, and he can come to all of our banquets and give talks, right? Like I was hired not because of what I could bring to the organization, right? From an education standpoint, because truthfully, I wasn't qualified to work with young people, but I was hired, because of the ways that that nonprofit organizations are forced, right, to fundraise, right? That they have to prove their value instead of folks really taking the time to understand the constituents that they serve and the real needs that they're working to solve. So I was working here and I got introduced to the concept of feminism. And it was like being fractured open. It was like someone had put language to every struggle that I had ever had. And I was introduced to feminism, and this is an important component, because I did something deeply, deeply sexist. And my supervisor at the time, a woman named Lillian Rivera, she asked me to read this book by Bell Hooks. It was called Feminist Theory from Margin to Center. And I had to read it 3 times, because the first 2 times I read it with an oppositional disposition, right? And the third time that I read it, I realized that feminism wasn't about women. It was about everybody. It was about us all. It is something that that Black women have created in concert with other women to bring us back to ourselves, and to learn and to teach us how do we sit in community, but also in beautiful forms of conflict, right? So that we can learn about each other, so that we can learn about ourselves, and then like we can wrestle with the complicated nature of life, right? And if you face it, then you can move past it. But if you don't face it, then you just can't. Yeah. So I would say that job that I had at the Hedrick Martin Institute, which is an amazing organization in New York City, that is the through line to where I am now.
Wow. Wow. It's quite a journey, man. That's crazy. Wow. That's amazing. So I guess, yeah, to follow up that question, we're in a pandemic. 2020 was a roller coaster, and still, we're still in it, but the pandemic has had a major, impact on all of us. We've had to acquire new habits, such as, mask wearing, quarantining, social distancing. And also when I think about the pandemic, it's definitely affected us college students, had to really steer through both virtual and online classes, and trying to find jobs and internships in a recovering economy. There's a lot going on. And the question I have for you is, how have you navigated the pandemic in your career? And what sort of advice do you have for students who are entering the job market?
So transparently, I work for an organization that thankfully has been able to weather this the storm that we're all in. A colleague of mine said that we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat, right? And I am in a boat of extreme privilege, right? I have I am in a different boat, so I want to name and own that. But during this time, I've been thinking deeply, right? Like, how do I give up my power and give up my privilege to make sure that those who sit at the margins, right, have greater access to what they have told me that they need. And I make that distinction because oftentimes those of us with great power and great privilege think that we know what's best for other people, but we don't have enough proximity, right, to the source. And we need to always trust that the source knows what's best for itself. So I use that as a connection to say that those of you who are entering, who are thinking about what's next, my first ask of you all is to trust in your own knowing of what you need, right? Like, you are the source, right? And to know that what this pandemic is doing is it's laying bare so many inequities that many of you all have already known, right? Ta-Nehisi Coates, he said this, that, and it was so genius. He said that that the pandemic is a conversation about race. It's a conversation about gender inequality. It's a conversation about all of these things. What people don't want to you, it's for us to respond, right? Because they are like, why you keep talking about all these folks who are marginalized and blah, blah, blah. No. The pandemic brought it up, right? Like everybody else brought those things up.
Right.
So, you know, I honestly and truly don't have a great answer to your question, and because I don't like to, you know, but what I will say is to trust that you all are still here and that you have learned something. Like, and it may sound weird, right? But you know, there's a difference between being alive and living, right? Like to struggle is to be alive, right? To take what you've learned from that struggle and use it going forward is to live. So I would ask you all to really interrogate, like, what have you learned about the world? What have you learned about yourself? What have you learned more about institutions, right? And take all of those learnings and then make an informed decision about what you want to do next, right? So I was watching a PBS the other day, and they were talking about how there's an absence of people who are willing to go into trade jobs, right? Now, if I told everyone on this call maybe that, hey, like there's a job out there that will pay you $100,000, many of us would be like, where do I sign up? But then if I said, if that job was in the trade, right? Like somebody may say, well, I don't want to be a plumber. I don't want to be an electrician. I offer that framework to say, like, don't be concerned about what other people say is a good job. Don't be concerned about what other people will think about potentially the job that you have. Like, can you just think, like, what am I good at? Right? Like, what gets me out of bed? What motivates me? Chase that. Don't chase all these other things, because it's always gonna, it's typically, and it has for me, it's led me astray. It has led me astray from my purpose. It has led me astray from what my motivations are. A friend of mine, Tony Harris Quinterly, said that oftentimes her energy, I mean, you know, the thing that she wants to become, oftentimes she doesn't have the energy to chase it, right? But what that often says is that potentially the thing that you're chasing is not aligned with your purpose, right? So how do we use this time to get clear on our purpose? How do we match that with the things that truly motivate us, right? And then how do we chase that? Because then you will be happy with whatever you end up doing, even though it may not be the six-figure job, even though it may not, you know, be the shiny job where you're working on television or you're working with a well-known magazine. But like, can you wake up every day and say that, wow, like I'm actually working towards my purpose, which is working towards a better world, right? Because all of us at the end of the day have one job. We really do, right? It is to figure out, like, how do we take care of each other? Because everything else, it doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, when we're all, you know, laying in a casket or something similar to that, like the memories and the people who we touched, not the money who we made, are the stories that people will tell.
Wow. You are so deep, man. I feel like I've just taken all this in, I'm absorbing it, and I know everybody that's listening is just like awestruck. Truly amazing, man. I think this next question I have for you is a perfect, you know, segue. You had mentioned that to struggle is to live. You know, all of us have gone through our highs and lows in life, you know, and I think that definitely influences the person that we become. So I think the question I have is, how have the mountaintop experiences and the valley experiences in your life inspired your career?
I think my struggles and my seemingly ability to overcome them, it makes me a deeply empathetic person, deeply empathetic. And when you're working in diversity and inclusion, inclusion is an interesting word, right? Because that means everybody, right? So if I think about the struggles that I had, I remember the first time I realized that I was attracted to other boys. I was it was a terror in my head like I had never experienced. You know, I was a kid who grew up getting spanking, right? So I thought I knew what terror looked like when my mom said, hey, you know, you done showed out in class, and when I get home, it's gonna be me and you, right? And my mother didn't make idle threats. So I knew that type of terror, right?
Mhm.
But when I realized that I was gay, it was a different type of terror, because what I was afraid of was the whole world, right? So it was a different type of terror, right? So, you know, that fear, the fear of when I learned that that my skin color would cause other people to be afraid of me, not because of me, but because of them, right? Like I often tell folks that that anti-blackness has actually nothing to do with blackness, but it has everything to do with whiteness, right? But when you learn that, as Baldwin would say, that because of your skin color and your gender, you know, the world may see you as a walking phallic symbol. Like all of those learnings, you know, like you internalize them, you know, and I internalized all of those messages. And this may sound really strange, but there was one song that I played over and over and over again that helped me kind of vomit up all of the stuff that I had internalized. And it was a song by Erykah Badu called Bag Lady, right? And it is a song that when you listen to it, you might miss it. But she has a reframe in the song, and she says, maybe love will make it better. And she says it over and over and over and over again. And what she's talking about is self-love. And what I had to learn was how to love myself, right? And I say this often, like when I was young, and I would imagine for many of us when we're young, your parents or some adult figure tells you that you should love yourself, but they never tell you how. You know what I mean? Like the how is the practice. So I had to develop my own practice of self-love. And that is what is my catalyst for the work that I do now, right? Is how do I, as an inclusion person, be disinterested in trying to change people? Because I can't change you. But what I believe I can do is I can invest you with the esteem, I can invest you with the morale, I can invest you with more information and education where you will decide for yourself if you want to change, right? Because there's a difference if I came over to your house and said, hey, I got this message and I'm here to change your heart and mind, right? Your first thought was maybe, well, what's wrong with me, right? Because we come to our certainty so rare. Like we know very few things for certain, right? So if you have something that you have come over time to know for certain, and I'm telling you, I'm going to change your mind, you actually further invest and entrench yourself in those beliefs. But if I can invest you with some self-esteem, with some morale, with some confidence, right, and give you lots of information, right, and then go, all right, I'm gonna walk away, right, and trust that if you engage with that on your own terms in your own time, right, then you decide for yourself what's the best move for you, because I'm allowing you to have agency, and no one wants their agency taken from them. No one wants to feel powerless. And when we feel powerless, we continue to entrench in ourselves. So my work is really rooted in my understanding that that when I felt powerless, when I felt high levels of unsafety, I was unable to learn. I was unable to connect with others. I was unable to grow. But when I stepped into my own space of self-love and self-care, then I was able to extend a hand to someone else, right? Like I was able to sit in conversation with someone who I vehemently may disagree with, but still offer them love, because that's what I would have needed, right? You know what I mean? So I try to think through of like so here's an example. Now I think that they said that you studied Chinese, right?
Yeah, Correct.
right? So I've never studied a language outside of French, right? And so I don't know what it's like to study a foreign language at the depths that you did, right? So I don't have that experience. But if you were to describe that experience with great detail and clarity, right? And you start talking about your feelings, and you may say, I had high levels of anxiety. I went through some depression over it some time. I had fears for my tests, right? I know what it feels like to have anxiety. I know what it feels like to be stressed. I know what it feels like to, like feelings aren't
Shared experience.
like they're shared experiences, right? And through that, I can make a connection with you, right? So I tell people often, like, to be disinterested in saying that I've had the same experience, and be more interested in what you learned from the experience. And that's how we make a connection. So that's what I really try to do with my work, is to ask really thoughtful questions, questions that are truly from a good place, right? And then think through, when have I experienced those feelings similarly, and what did I need in those moments? And through that, I can make some, I can create a world inside of the corporate space that is truly inclusive.
Inclusive. Wow. Yeah, you hit the hammer on the nail, man. I truly believe everything you stated. The only way that you can truly love and empower others is you gotta love yourself, and truly, tap into your gifts and your strengths, because everybody is unique and powerful in their own ways. And we have something, important to bring and showcase to the world. So I 100% agree. So next question, as a gay Black man, how do you bring your identities into the workplace? And why do you believe diversity and inclusion is essential and necessary?
So I'll answer the second question first. It's probably a little easier. It's essential because if people don't feel, as we say at Netflix, accepted, respected, and reflected, right? And then there is no way that I can do my best work, right? And most of us, right, when we're doing jobs that we love, right, like, we want to strive for excellence. And if the culture is such, right, where I don't feel expected, reflected, and respected, then I can't do my best work, because there are barriers, right? And there are barriers that weren't created by me. There were barriers that were pre-existing my time there, right? So if I have co-conspirators who can partner with me, right, to get those barriers out of the way, then I can do my best work. And then not only do I thrive, not only do my colleagues thrive, but the organization thrives, right? Like, it has a compounding effect, right? So if you think about it from the sense of a family, right? So any community, if there's one person who is not allowed to attempt to chase excellence, right? That person's feeling of oppression it's going to impact everyone else, right? It's like when you were young, right? And for those of you who live in stereotypical families with, actually no, if you lived in a household with a group of people and one person was not happy, right? Everybody's not happy, right? Or you have to close those individuals off, or you have to silo them, right? So it's really about, like, can we create the conditions for people to do the best work that they can do that'll impact us all? Now, as far as the first question, I don't know. I don't know if it's important to me to bring all of those identities into the workplace. And I'm going to detangle this because that could sound very problematic. What's important to me is that I don't have to leave anything at home, right? Because there are times when because, like, I'm not just Black, I'm not just gay, right? I'm so many things, right? And I don't consciously think I'm bringing my Black stuff into work today. I'm bringing my gay stuff, right? But it would be a problem if I couldn't bring all of me, right? So I would say that I'm less focused on my Black, gay, and my gay identity. I'm more focused on, are there barriers that I can bring all of me into the workplace, right? Now, it is important, right, that I can articulate the value of having Black, queer, folks who are underrepresented in any identity into the workplace, right? But I don't want people to think that they have got to choose which identity has more value, and that they, and that those identities are much more salient, right, or important to the organization, right? So I would say that be disinterested in which identity that you should bring into the workplace, and more kind of focused on of like that you don't have to leave any parts of you at home. Like that's when you have a truly inclusive culture, right? And that the organization, knows how to cultivate an environment that those identities are celebrated, right? And like so I would say that's more of the trick. Now, it's also important that the organization does not use you as the thing that they learn through, right? So for example, if you're a person of color, specifically during Black History Month, or if you're a woman during Women's History Month, don't do the labor of telling people what this month means to you. Make them go out and do their own damn work, right? When George Floyd was murdered, folks kept saying, like, what does it feel like to be Black right now? What's it feel like to be white right now? Like, answer that question, right? Right? Because like there is a performative nature that those who are in the dominant group typically ask of those who have the boot on our neck, right? So be disinterested in trying to articulate the impacts of the world's inhumanity, but be more interested in forcing those who are in the dominant group to speak to what does it feel like that the world is acting on your behalf, right? So when George Floyd was murdered, the world was acting on behalf of white supremacy. Like that's the much more interesting question, right? When the Me Too movement happened, be disinterested in what women are feeling, right? Be more interested in what men are feeling, right? So try to put the work and the labor on those who are in the dominant group, right? To do real introspection, a real reading, and push them to move past this state of, I'm listening. Okay, you've been listening for a long time now. What you hear? What you learn, right? So how do we switch the narrative that if the boot is on your neck, I don't need to describe the boot. I want you to describe why you have your boot on my neck and why you haven't moved it.
Wow. Yeah. And just to piggyback off of what you said, man, I think, as me being a Black man, I feel like definitely representation matters, right? Like when you see somebody that's in a space that embraces truly like similar self-identities to you and just embraces themselves, it really serves as like an inspiration and encouragement. Like, yeah, I believe I can do that and do exactly, what that person does. You know what I mean? So yeah, wow. This discussion is amazing, man. You are really throwing some knowledge on all of us right now. So I really appreciate that. So another question. So you've broken so many barriers in your life. And the question I have is, who has served as a role model for you? And what advice do you have for students who will need to be trailblazers as they enter into their respective fields?
I've had a lot of role models, but definitely my first role model was my mother. As I mentioned, I'm a Southerner. I was born in the church. I was raised in the church, and I remember. So this will tell you the how I view my mother. So my mother would sing in the choir. She's an obligato soprano, and she had this really beautiful, big, powerful, amazing voice. And my grandmother was a deaconess, so she would sit in the front pew with the white on and the white hat and everything.
Okay.
And I remember thinking to myself, I was probably like around 5 or 6. I remember thinking, why is my mother not in the pulpit? Or my grandmother, because these were two powerful women. Because as a kid, right, there were only men in the pulpit, right? And I remember one day after church, I pulled on my mother's dress as a little kid. I looked up at her and I was like, hey, why are you not up there? But what I was really asking was, why are there no women up there? And my mother, in her own way, she looked down at me and she said, "Shut up, boy." Right now, I tell you that story as a joke, but what is true is that how do you explain to a 5 or 6-year-old kid patriarchy? How do you explain that, right? How do you also complicate that story by throwing in the narrative of white supremacy? Because what I've come to learn is that the Black church was one of the few spaces where Black men actually had access to power, right? So there was almost like this this unspoken agreement that wasn't really an agreement, right? That the Black church and the pulpit were spaces where Black men had access to power, right? And women, in their infinite wisdom, knew, as Nikki Giovanni might say, that men needed to have that level of power, right? But as I became older, and my mother, and when I moved my mother from just mom to a woman who was a human being who had a life before me, she became even a greater role model, because I learned like the sacrifices that my mother made, right? And what I often come to find out is that young men, specifically me, right, aren't given the tools to see women as role models, right? So right now in America, there are 5,913 statues. I know that for a fact. And of those 5,913 statues, only 400 of them are women. Of those 400 statues, more than half are goddesses or ladies of liberty, right? Which means that we've created a world where that most of the women models that exist out there are fictional. They're not even real, right? And what that meant to me is that I had never thought about my mother as anything but my mother. She was so much more than me. She had a life before me and she had a life after me, right? So I tell you that story to say that my mother has been 5,913 statues. Someone asked the question. It may be different now, but this is when I was doing my research for my book. But I just offer that to say like that I had to learn how to understand how great of a model that my mother was. Like she was the role model for manhood, for womanhood, for success, for excellence, for everything that I come to learn. Like my mother was my key role model. I would say another huge role model has been James Baldwin. James Baldwin, to your point, was a Black queer man who is, in my opinion, the greatest critical thinker the world has ever seen. And what James Baldwin helped me see or to reinvest in is the value of critical thinking, right? To not take things at face value, but to look underneath it for the why and the how, right? I would say another big role model for me is a fellow Southerner, a fellow Louisianan, is Brittany Cooper. So Brittany Cooper has this amazing book out called Eloquent Rage, which I recommend that you all read. And what Brittany Cooper has helped me understand is the value of family and the value of home, right? So someone asked Brittany during an interview once, how does she stay grounded as such a, she's a professor, she's so many things, but one thing that she is grounded. And she said that she surrounds herself with people who are not impressed by her. And I was like, damn, she's right, right? So I try to keep myself around people who are not impressed by me, who know I'm basic, who know that, as my mother would say, I ain't shit. And those people keep me on the ground, and they keep me from, as my grandmother would also say, from smelling myself to think that I've become something that I'm not, right? So I would say those are probably 3 people who have had a huge impact on my life. And if you ever want to just witness a level of genius that is undescribable, spend some time with Professor Dr. Brittany Cooper.
Thank you for that, man. So this is the last question. This one's a little, more fun, and basically it's, since you're the Vice President of Inclusion Strategy for Product at Netflix, what is your favorite series or movies on Netflix? What's the last one you binged? Because, you know, we've all been in quarantine, you know. All I was
Yeah.
doing, man, you know, like just watching shows back to back.
So I did bridge. I mean, I binged Bridgerton. So I don't binge a lot. So my partner
Okay.
and I, we typically watch two episodes a night. Like we try to be good. So we watch Bridgerton, Schitt's Creek. We watch. What else did we watch? What else did we watch recently? It was really good. That's a good question. So we don't watch a lot of TV. I'll be honest with you. Our day goes, we watch PBS NewsHour with Judy, and we talk to Judy through the screen, and then we'll have a debate, and then we do what? Oh, so there's a Netflix show. It's a home improvement show. We love home improvement shows. So that was we started watching I Care a lot. We haven't finished it yet. But what else did we watch? But the last thing that we really binged, we watched The Crown all the time. We love that. Oh, there's a show on Netflix called Atypical that is amazing. If you want to really understand neurotypicality and neurodivergence and disability, I mean, it is such an amazing show. It's so thoughtful. We watched Queen's Gambit. But yeah, I would recommend you all watch Atypical. If there's one show that I would say watch, it would be Atypical, because so I have learned recently how ableistic and that I am, and it's been a great show to force me to look at myself in the mirror. And the reason that I name out loud that I'm ableistic, that I'm sexist, that I'm all these things is I want you all to hold me accountable. When you hear me do something or say something that is an ism or a phobia, call me in on it, right? And my job is to thank you. And then my next job is to go and do some reading, right? And then to come back to you and say, hey, here's what I learned. You know what I mean? Like, to make a commitment that when I fall short of showing up like a brother or a family member, that I am held accountable to that, right? And accountability, as my friend, Dr. Trejon Lindsay says, accountability is a love practice. Like, when you love someone, you hold them accountable. Like that is the truth, right? Accountability is a love practice. It is not a form of harm, you know. Like it is not something that people do to you because they don't love you. Like, we do it because we do love you, and we know that you can not only do better, but that you can be better, right? And then if when you know better and you do better, then we're better to each other, right? So how do we shift the narrative that accountability is a love practice? It is not something that I'm doing to actually harm you.
Right. I completely agree. Being transparent, you know, communicating with a person who you're in a relationship with, you're trying to make them better. And, you know, yeah, I completely agree. So, you know, that pretty much wraps up all the questions I have for you, Wade. Once again, man, it was a pleasure. You truly are an inspiration to so many people. And it was, like I said, an honor to be able to have this discussion with you. Like I said, I'm still like, just like, wow, I'm talking to this guy. Like, this is
man, trust me, I'm basic. Trust me. I'm gonna hop off of this call and have a banana. And yesterday I found a place that gets sour pickles, because they only have sour pickles in the gas station in the South, and I found a place. So that tells you, trust me, I'm basic. So I'm gonna have some sour pickles and what else? And probably watch HGTV.
Nice. Very nice. But like I said, man, thank you so much. And now I'd like to bring into the discussion Paula Booke, who is the director for the Center for Academic Equity at Tulane, and Eddy Cruz, who is the assistant dean and the director for career services at Tulane. They will be conducting our audience Q&A. So still got more on the way, y'all. Enjoy.
Thanks so much, Trejon. This has been an amazing conversation, and I feel like I'm learning so much and growing in my thinking, and I hope everyone in the audience is enjoying just as much as I am. I'm drawn into this conversation because as the director of the Center for Academic Equity, it really is my mission to really support academic excellence for every Tulanean by centering the voices of BIPOC, QT, first generation, POSSE, and college track students through engagement, advocacy, and enrichment. Our goal is to help students succeed by providing the resources that they need for the classroom, study abroad experiences, research, internships, and really to explore every facet of their burgeoning scholarship. So I am so excited to learn from Wade and from Trejon about all of the wonderful things that they're thinking about as they think about diversity, equity, and inclusion in their lives. And I'm glad to be joined in this moderation by my colleague, Eddy Cruz, who's the Assistant Dean and the Director of Career Services within Newcomb-Tulane College. It's such an amazing conversation, and we're going to launch right into the questions that you have.
Yes, thank you, Paula, and Wade, thank you again for being here. It's great to hear all the information and just your knowledge that you've been sharing today. So thank you for that. The question I have is really about reverse mentoring. And so, Wade, early on you mentioned right in the beginning, you mentioned having opportunity to learn from Trejon in this conversation as well. And so, Trejon, this question is actually for you to get us started. What advice do you have for Wade's generation, and regarding what advice do you have for Wade's generation and the rest of the workforce when engaging you and your peers?
Ooh. All right, let me take a moment to think about this one. I feel like first and foremost, just through being at Tulane, all the kids who I've encountered, and I think our generation, we are very just passionate about an array of things. I consider us to be like a very multifaceted generation. We have many passions and interests that we want to pursue and bring to, our future, industries. And I think for Wade's generation and the generations above us is to, I wouldn't say allow us to like freestyle, but more so, let me think about this one. I think a big thing is really allowing us to bring who we are to the table. I feel like time and time again, when applying for jobs and stuff, we aren't truly allowed to bring our self-identities and who we are to, whatever work we do. I feel like it can sometimes be diminished. And like I said, I think the biggest thing is looking at like who we are and embracing our self-identities and allowing those companies to truly see that. Because I think a big thing and a problem in the workforce is the lack of diversity and inclusion. I feel like lots of people in positions really look at it as fulfilling a quota, really trying to just be like, oh, let's try to get these people in there and these people. And that's definitely what it shouldn't be. It should be more so over embracing these people for who they are, really listening to their stories and what they have to bring to the table. Because I truly believe that diversity is essential to the future of any industry. Like having multiple people from various backgrounds, like bringing in their points of views and ideas to truly collaborate, create something truly beautiful and just adds on to the success of any organization you're in. So I think just the generation above needs to understand we're coming in hot. We really have a lot to bring to the table. And I think in this day and age, embracing self-identities is so crucial. So really just creating an inclusive space where we feel free to share our ideas, our concerns. And yeah, it's a tough question, but I feel like definitely allowing us to bring our self-identities to the table and just allowing us to express our concerns and our ideas. Because I feel like when I've had the opportunity to intern for a couple companies here and there, and I feel like when you're in there, you're kind of intimidated by the people in those power positions because you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't ask these questions or give them advice because they're the ones above me, you know? So I think to just establish um, an environment where we feel like our voices can truly be heard is very essential. If that was a good response. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. We have another question, and this is, I'm going to read the question for you. For me, to be an artist is to live, and without practicing art, things are very dark. What's your best advice for a queer pop artist who needs help propelling through the portal from Silicon Valley into the entertainment area to shine their light and uplift their fellow artists?
I think that question's for me. What's the best advice? I would say the best advice is going, and this is going to be super hard. The best advice is that you have got to have principles and values that you're not willing to compromise on. And that may mean, right, that what you have deemed success in that area may never come. It may never come, right? Because when you are moving up in the world, and it could be Hollywood, it could be a consumer packaged good organization, it could be any corporate industry. There is going to be an ask. It's going to be implicit and it's going to be explicit for you to make compromise. But artists at their core, right, cannot be a real artist if they give up the principles and values that undergird their artistry. You just can't, right? So Baldwin said this. He said, a teacher that is not free to teach what they believe is actually not a teacher. So an artist who is not free to create what is in their heart and what they believe is no longer an artist. So, and this is going to be the hardest thing that ever happens to someone who is a real artist, is to not compromise their principles and their values in order to enter into the industry. And I say that because that may mean that you don't ever get access. But what you will maintain is your own humanity. Because once you give up your humanity, it's really hard to get it back, because the industry itself will always be making these asks and these demands, right? So so that is my advice. And I know that it's not easy to hear, but if you do the work, the opportunities will come, right? If you do the work, but you're going to have to be really conscious of what are you willing to give up? What are you willing to give up, right? Because by giving up something, you will gain something else, but you're going to have to figure out, is what you're willing to give up worth it? Yeah. And again, I know that that's a really hard thing for me to say, but it is really, really honest.
Thank you. This next question is, let's see here. So I'm going to go with, can you share with us why, actually, hold on, I'm sorry about that. So when you think about the private and public sector, how do you believe large corporations can change our society for the better?
So corporations are truly, I would say 99% of them are at the beck and call of the consumer, honestly and truly, right? If y'all stop watching Netflix, or you stop watching certain shows on Netflix, right, then our programming it'll change. If you stop buying Nike, right, then Nike will, they will have to, corporations have to evolve and they have to adapt in order to stay alive. So if you've seen Judas and the Black Messiah, one of the things that's in there is true, is that the power is with the people, right? But oftentimes, again, we give up that power because we don't know how to work as a collective. Like we don't know how to bring people together with a common purpose. So if we desire corporations to have a role in shaping our society, we've got to demand different things from corporations. But that means that we have to, I said it in the last answer, that we've got to give up something, right? Like you can't expect corporations to behave in a certain way if no matter what they do, you still take advantage of their products and services, right? And you've seen, you know, over the last couple of years that corporations have started to adjust, have started to adapt, have started to evolve because of public pressure and public groundswell. So the role of the corporation is really rooted in what society deems as important, you know, because there is always going to be a clash between society and what people might call the artist, right? And the artist's job is to push society in certain directions, and society's job is to keep the artist from disturbing the peace. I mean, like it happens all of the time, right? So you know, so the people, right, which are the artists, have to continually push society, which is the corporation in many instances, to know better and to do better. Otherwise, those societies, those corporations will go away. So if you want to hold corporations accountable, typically one of the best ways to do it is with the dollar.
Thank you so much, Wade. This has been really and truly an inspiring conversation, and I've learned so much. I want to thank Trejon as well for leading that amazing interaction. I want to thank Anneliese Singh for, well, everything that she has done and the light that she's brought into our community. And I want to thank President Fitz for making space for these amazing engagements to happen, for us to continue to learn and grow together as a community. To the audience who joined us, this has been an amazing start. There are so many great conversations happening on campus. I hope that you'll plug what you've learned from this conversation into the many that are happening throughout our engagements. We are so very sad to see this time end, but reflective of what we've learned here and what we can take from this space into the world. Thank you so much for joining us all, and thank you for this wonderful time. Take care.